Hello, Gold Derbyites. Welcome back to another episode of Awards Magnet. I'm Deputy Editor Ethan Alter, and this week we have a special edition. We're going to be interviewing the director of Roofman with Derek Cianfrance. And he is going to be on the pod talking about his new movie, which is in theaters as you're hearing this, October 10th. It's a great conversation. He talks about his inspiration to make the movie, his how he cast Channing Tatum in the role, and lots of other great details. So we're going to be sharing that for you with you soon. But before we get into that, we wanted to kick around the movie a little bit and talk it out with some of the folks at Gold Derby who have seen it. I got a chance to see it in Toronto, and our senior editor, Denton Davidson, and our editor-in-chief, Deborah Birnbaum, have also seen it out in Los Angeles. So we're going to have a fun little chat off the top about Roofman, our thoughts, and where we think it factors into the awards race as the sort of studio commercial option of the marketplace right now. So thanks for joining me both.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
So let's talk Roofman. I got a chance to see it, as I said, at Toronto, and I have to say I was really caught off guard by it. I went in not sure what to expect. I'd seen some early footage at CinemaCon where it seemed like a real mishmash of tones. And I should say off the top, sort of describing the story a little bit, it's the story of Jeffrey Manchester, who's played by Channing Tatum in the film. He's a former United States Army Reserve soldier who embarked on a career where he was known as the rooftop robber because he'd break into businesses via the roof. And then he was thrown in prison for this activity, escaped from prison, and then hid out for a few months in a Toys R Us store. Where and during this time where he was hiding out, he got involved in a relationship with a single mom named Lee Moore, who is played in the movie by Kirsten Dunst. So again, real story adapted into what's basically a romantic drama in the vein of a Jerry Maguire or a Risky Business, is sort of how I put it to him. And two movies that I like a lot, and I think maybe that's why I responded to this. But how did you feel? How did you both feel about it when you saw it?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's funny. I knew the story before. I think I listened to way too many true crime podcasts, so I had known the story before. But Channing is so endearing, and the character himself is so endearing. He's kind of a nice criminal. Before he locks the McDonald's employees in the fridge, he actually gives up his coat, and the movie kind of plays into that charmingness of him. So even though he's a criminal, you kind of root for him. So there's that about it. I saw it at an Academy screening, and the audience kind of went for it. And Channing is the kind of actor that takes you along this journey with him. There's some things that you can kind of challenge. He's doing this all for his daughter, and then he kind of forgets about his daughter, and you sort of lose track of that. But look, it's a real life story, and I don't want to quibble with the drama of the real life story, because it is funny, and the time that he spends in the Toys R Us store is charming and endearing. And if you like peanut M&Ms, you're going to get a lot of peanut M&Ms. So it's really sweet. It's nice to kind of root for this kind of very bizarre hero's journey, and you're going to get taken on this very strange, twisted, and not your normal hero's journey. But look, given the mix of these very dark movies that we've all been seeing this award season, this is a nice, different kind of film to have into the conversation.
One thing you touch on is like how you feel when you walk out of the movie. And unlike so many of the Oscar contenders, we get so wrapped into awards movies and Oscar contenders this time of year. That's all we're really thinking about. And what I remember is walking out of this movie and just being like, that was good. I really liked it. And I had a smile. Everyone had a smile on their face as we were leaving. Like, it's just, people are going to like this movie. I don't know how big of a blockbuster it's going to be, but I think it's going to be a commercial hit. As Deborah said, Channing is great. Kirsten Dunst is great. You're rooting for everyone. It feels like a family movie in a lot of ways, even though it's rated R, and there's, I guess, some riskier moments that aren't meant for kids. But it feels like a holiday movie. It could be a Thanksgiving release. It takes place over Christmas, and I mean, it just makes you feel good.
And for once, your heart doesn't get ripped out. I mean, so many times I've walked out of screenings and I just feel like I want to go back into bed, put the blankets over my head, and just think like, God, what am I doing with my life? And this is something that leaves you smiling. Now, is this going to make the top 10 of Best Pictures? I don't know. I mean, I think it's a tough season. We've got a lot of contenders. We've talked a lot about the films that are in there. Is this the most important subject we're going to be talking about? No, no, I don't think it's going to crack into the top 10. But we've been talking a lot about the Globes and what's going to happen on the Globe side of things. We talk a lot about how there's comedy races, and maybe this is a film that's going to break into there. Ethan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the comedy in the Globe seems like a very likely candidate. And it's funny, coming out of the movie when I saw Toronto, the first thing that came to mind in the comparison I made in my instant Oscar odds post was, is this the next Jerry Maguire? Because it definitely felt like a kind of Cameron Crowe, again, a Cameron Crowe mid-90s movie, a romantic drama made for adults with movie stars, and that also plays a lot of different tones and has a lot of different memorable moments that mixes comedy and drama and sadness and all that. And I think this movie is a very great throwback to that kind of era when Jerry Maguire, for example, was nominated for Best Picture, in addition to a lot of other Best Actor for Tom Cruise, Best Screenplay, a lot of other nominations as well. So my thinking going in was, oh, Roofman could be that movie. This could be a return to a movie star-led drama that finds its way into the Oscar race. It's unclear right now, as you said, Deborah. There's a lot of competition, but I definitely see on the comedy musical side of the Globe, certainly, and it can easily qualify in comedy without any concern because there are a lot of big laughs in it throughout.
For sure. And you end up rooting for him. And I think Channing just can really pull this off. I don't know that another actor would have done that, but I think Channing has so much goodwill. And again, not to pick apart the story at all, but I think he does pull it off, and he really is trying to do the best. He has the best of intentions. And even if they go wildly awry, he's coming at it from a place with a really good heart.
It's funny too, because I mean, all of this it sounds so unbelievable, but I just interviewed the real Lee Moore, who Kirsten Dunst plays in the film, and we're going to run that on Monday after people have a chance to watch it. But everything in this is true. Like, it's just almost unbelievable. Like, he lived in the back of the Toys R Us, like all of this, and how the relationship develops. And I think part of the thing in the movie is people are like, how is she so stupid? Like, there's red flags everywhere for this guy. But this whole thing really took place over like 6 to 8 weeks. Like, they didn't really know each other. They weren't together every day. So it was really kind of blew my mind how true this film actually is. And I think Channing is the perfect sort of Golden Globes comedy nominee. That would be perfect. Kirsten, she's got a tougher battle because it's an all-encompassing category in supporting. I mean, I guess she could go lead comedy if that's a choice too. That's a possibility.
Yeah, for me, this is really the role that Channing Tatum's been building to throughout his career. We've seen him do a lot of different pieces of what this role demands. He's been in comedies, obviously, with the 21 Jump Street movies. He's done action movies like White House Down. He's done romances like his Nicholas Sparks era. So he's done all the different pieces, and it's great to see him pull them all together into this one performance. And again, it just makes me think of the 90s of that Tom Cruise had, that George Clooney had. That kind of movie star performance, I think, often gets lost, especially these days when you see movie stars doing more character pieces, whether it's Dwayne Johnson in Smashing Machine or Timothy Chalamet and Marty Supreme. So seeing someone just lean into their movie starness, I think that's a lost art, and I think it's something that gets overlooked sometimes when it comes to the awards conversation too, because it is a hard thing to pull off, and he makes it look easy in this movie.
And Peter Dinklage is really good in this too.
Yes.
I mean, he's like really a lot of the comic relief. I think he's sort of been swept under the rug a little bit in the conversations. People aren't talking about him, but he's really also great in this film.
Yeah, it's got a great supporting cast, like Ben Mendelsohn, Uzo Aduba. Like, it's just like there's not a moment where there's like a character you're like, oh, this doesn't work. The whole thing comes together really well.
Big stars in very small parts. Like,
yes.
And I was curious about that. Like, what was going on with the casting for this? Because they did manage.
I think it speaks to the screenplay. I mean, I think it's a strong screenplay. I think it all comes together so well, and I think that's probably what drew these actors to these parts.
Yeah, there's little like Easter eggs in the film too. Like, the woman who arrested him initially is actually in the film as like the FBI agent that lives in the town when she's when they're introducing each other at like this brunch or whatever. So it's interesting that there are little cameos throughout the film too, that you sort of, when you go back and watch all these YouTube clips and stuff after, it's just kind of fun. It's one of those like fun true stories where you go back and you look at the real people, and it's like people just like to dig into that sort of true crime story. And this is one that's not, as Deborah said, gonna rip your heart out. You'll
be okay.
Even though he's a criminal, and it's like he's a fun criminal. He's a polite criminal. He gives you your coat as he escorts you to the McDonald's freezer.
Right. Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
I'll be curious to see how this does at the box office.
Yes, yeah, that'll be really interesting. Again, it'll be a test of whether people are ready. We always hear about, are people ready to go back and see comedies in movie theaters, and this is a good test of, are people ready to go back and see movie star led romantic dramas in theaters. And I hope so. I mean, certainly a movie like It Ends With Us broke out, so it is possible. There is that path to commercial success.
Reviews have been good. I mean, the reviews are trickling in at they're over 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like people will like it.
Right. Absolutely. And I do think there's also, even if it winds up not getting into the Best Picture race or the Best Director race, there is a good chance in Best Original Screenplay, because that's where it qualifies. And again, it can be the Jerry Maguire of the year in that way, of being this a throwback commercial movie that gets recognized in that category. And it would be Derek Cianfrance's second nomination in that category. He got a nomination for Sound of Metal 5 years ago, so that would be his second screenplay nomination, which would be nice to see for sure. I think he views it as kind of a departure for him from
it is a departure
Valentine.
for him.
Right,
Sure.
exactly.
Quite a different film.
But yeah, it'd be nice to see him get recognized for this pivot he is consciously making, as you'll hear him talk about. He definitely views this as a pivot film for him towards in a different, more commercial direction than some of his past movies. Yeah, no, the commercial reaction will definitely be interesting to monitor. And then we also have a few more commercial movies coming out that we'll have to see how they factor into the awards race, which is obviously Wicked for Good, and then Avatar: Fire and Ash. Those are sort of the big studio movies that we are assuming are going to be awards players as well. And Roofman is the first out of the gate in that school, where a lot of the other films are hailing from indie distributors or smaller labels. So it's a reminder that there are major studios also.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
this is Paramount's push. They need a win.
Right, exactly. Especially now that they have their new owners. They're under Skydance Media. They're in their Skydance Media era, so this will be their first test of new ownership pushing this movie out into the marketplace. But yeah, and any other favorite scenes from Roofman that you want to call out as it goes into theaters and people see it? Any big takeaways from the movie that you want to have viewers think about as they go in to see it?
I would just say, like, I think Channing Tatum was having the time of his life. Like, I'm curious to see like how much of it was improv, like the outtakes, like just the I know, you got a lot out of him about like building the Toys R Us, but just there was so much like joy and in the recreating of some of those scenes, that some of what happens, like he creates his own world inside the Toys R Us where he ends up living for 6 months. Those are pretty special.
Let's be honest. The scene everyone's going to be talking about is him running naked through the store.
Correct. The risky.
There's the audience is shrieking and screaming. I mean, it's what's going to happen if you go see the movie. So, right. And that's the fun part, and just go and enjoy with the audience.
Enjoy it for sure. I mean, there's a moment where he surprises Peter Dinklage, and I don't know who was more surprised, him or Peter Dinklage.
Yes, and we get into the streaking scene in the interview, and fun fact, as you'll hear, that was the first time Peter Dinklage saw Channing Tatum at all on set, was in that scene. That was
that's amazing.
That was the first time that he saw him. So that shock
that's
is
quite
real.
The introduction.
Exactly. Right. Excellent. Well, thanks for kicking around Roofman with me. Stay tuned for our chat with Derek Cianfrance, where you get to learn all about how the movie came together and what to look out for once it's in theaters this Friday. Hi, everyone. Please welcome Derek Cianfrance to Awards Magnet. Thanks for joining us, Derek.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you to talk about Roofman. I got to see the movie at the Toronto International Film Festival. You had your world premiere, and it looked like a great night. To walk us through that evening, being able to present it to the crowd for the first time.
That was the fourth movie I've had at Toronto. I always felt like there was just always such warm, kind of just passionate movie going audiences in Toronto, and so I've always had some really great memorable screenings, but that still doesn't erase like the nerves that come in, because here was a movie that I'd been working on for 4.5 years, and you just never know what's going to happen when you play it in that theater. But sitting down and watching it with those 1,800 people in that room, it was it just felt like so warm, and I love the movie theater. I love being in the movie theater. I love the experience of having this kind of shared experience with a bunch of strangers. And I screen my movie repeatedly when I'm in the editing room, so I watch it with an audience. Like this movie, I watched probably 25 times with different audiences, before I got to Toronto, so I knew what it felt like to watch it with an audience. But when you're in that room with 1,800 people and you're feeling the ride that everyone's going on together, it was beautiful.
I think one of the things I most enjoyed about my experience is it really transported me back from my seat in Roy Thompson Hall to watching movies in the 90s, just in my, typical multiplex, because it feels like a real 90s movie in a lot of ways. It's this kind of adult romantic drama that we just don't see a lot of anymore. It's star driven, has a lot of different mixtures of genres going on. And it's just a movie, I think is how I think about it. Tell me about bringing that style of film back in the present day.
It's so crazy you say that, because the first title of the first script, the very first words I wrote on the title page was movie. And this Roofman was called Movie for a month. I then changed the title to the Jeffrey Manchester movie, and then I changed the title to Roofman. But yeah, I had made a series of pretty heavy, very serious films over the years, and when I made I Know This Much Is True for HBO, I felt like I had kind of completed a chapter in my life. I'd gotten to the end of a cycle. I'd said everything I needed to say, I think, about ancestry, inheritance, sins of the father, and I wanted to try to find a movie that felt like those movies I loved when I was in my when I was growing up in my formidable years, the movies of the 80s and 90s, the movies that I used to, go to the movie theater and then rent them when they came on VHS, and then record them off of HBO, when they came on HBO, and then watch them over and over again. These movies that I just, loved, movies that kind of showed the potential of what could happen in a movie theater. And I really wanted to find a story that brought me back to that kind of fun, or those kind of roller coaster rides that movies would feel like. It wasn't necessarily escapism, but a movie that felt like it was talking about people and possibility that movies could transport these people into these different worlds and situations. And then I heard the story of Jeff Manchester, and I was like, wow, that is this guy who had robbed 45 McDonald's, but made sure people had jackets on before he put them in the freezer. And then he gets arrested and sentenced to 45 years. And then he breaks out of prison, and then, he doesn't hide in the woods like Rambo. He hides in a toy store. And I thought, well, this sounds like it has the potential to be a movie, to be that kind of movie that I wanted to see. But I wasn't sure. So, I got in touch with Jeff. He's in a maximum security prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. And he started calling me. And the phone calls last 15 minutes. At the end of 15 minutes, the phone call shut off. And the first time he called me, I just was really compelled by all these contradictions in this guy. Here was this hardened criminal who, gave people jackets before he put them in freezers. And he was this hardened criminal who hid in a Toys R Us, not the, guy who was in the Army for 9 years who hid in a Toys R Us, a survivalist story in the Toys R Us. So the story had a lot of those contradictions and this kind of magic, I think. And then I come to find out, after talking to Jeff, I spoke with him for 400 hours, that, he's a huge movie buff himself. And I have a theory that as he was living his life and doing the crazy things and making the insanely bad choices he was making, I think he was the protagonist in his own movie. And I think he was consciously aware of a movie that could be made of his life someday.
It's funny. Two movies that ran through my head watching it were Paul Mazursky's Risky Business and Cameron Crowe's Jerry Maguire. And I don't think it's an accident that both of those star Tom Cruise in a very, again, movie star turn in a movie. And it feels like you've given Channing Tatum his sort of Tom Cruise moment. It's a role that brings together a lot of the things he's great at in one role. And I thought it's a really terrific part for him. So tell me about deciding on Channing as your leading man to play your Roofman.
It's funny you say that. I have always loved Channing. When I first saw him in Guide to Recognizing Your Saints back in 2006, I thought, like, he was like walking down the street. He had his shirt off. He had like this dancer's body, but like this boxer's face. And he had a broken nose and blood. And he was at once like so beautiful and so vulnerable. And he was kind of an image of wounded masculinity. And I wanted to work with him immediately. Didn't work out the first time we tried to work together. But I became just such a fan of his over the years. And, when he was in like a romance movie, you just felt love, and when he was in an action movie, he was a great action star. And when he was in a comedy, he has some of the most hilarious moments in the last 20 years in movies. My Name is Jeff is just like, you can't not unsee that, and it's always funny, and then his dramatic chops, and Foxcatcher, like he was always my favorite part of any movie he'd been in. And when I was thinking about Jeff Manchester and thinking about all of the kind of stories in his story, I mean, at one, in one sense, it's a family drama, it's a comedy, it's a crime story, it's a prison escape movie, it's a romantic comedy, it's it's a detective cat and mouse story. Anyway, I just thought I needed to find an actor that could handle all those kind of mixed genres. And when I met with Channing, I met him in Prospect Park. I don't know, a few years ago. I had been working on the script for like 3 years, researching all the elements of all the characters in the movie. And I met with Channing in Prospect Park, and we had like a 6-hour walk through the park. And I never asked him I never pitched him the movie when I met him. I just talked to him about his life and just got a sense of like who he was as a person. And at the end of that 6-hour walk, I went back, I called my co-writer, Kurt Gunn, and I said, I think it's Channing. And so Kurt and I spent the next 9 months with Channing's voice in our heads and just closing our eyes and imagining the movie with Channing as that person. Because yes, we needed this person who was such an undeniably charismatic force that could carry all those different genres. And 9 months later, I gave Channing the script and I said, this was a real story, but it was inspired a lot by you and the potential that I think you could achieve on the screen. And he said yes. And, the rest is history.
There are two key scenes that really stick out in my mind about what makes his performance so great. One is a small scene. He's playing with Kirsten Dunst's younger daughter, with Legos. And Kirsten Dunst comes into the room and says, it's time to go. And she has to go to bed. And he's like, please, just one more. And just that moment of just the guileless innocence in his face is so perfect. And I think a lot about that scene as an example of what, again, the sort of range of emotions and personality can play.
Jeff, his story is one of a man with an inner child. It's a grown man living in a toy store. So there's a Peter Pan quality to the story. And Channing has that in spades. He is very connected to his inner child. And I could see that during our walk. I could see the boy in him. I mean, that just sparkles through him when you meet him. And the other thing about Channing that I realized in taking that walk with him was how generous he was to anyone he came in contact with. Someone where we bought like a water or a coffee from a barista. He took care of people. I had a friend who was at a wedding with him, like a very famous wedding. And my friend didn't know anyone. And he told me that Channing was at this big dinner party with all these famous people, and Channing took care of him the whole night. Channing made sure he wasn't alone. And that's just a quality in Channing that he just has. His heart is so big. And so those scenes were like the easiest scenes. I mean, first off, Kennedy Moyer, who plays Dee in this movie, is just such a bright light of a human being, and really great actor, great young actor. Her future is incredibly, she could do anything she wants. But to have those two connect and build that Lego set, and I let them build the whole Lego set. I mean, that's part of my process. Is I want actors to kind of forget that they're in a movie and kind of be immersed in a situation. So both Kennedy and Channing spent like 90 minutes building this Lego set together. And I just waited for the time. And then Kirsten comes around the corner. I knew they were almost done. And I said, you have to stop them. It's 11 o'clock. And so that moment came from like such a pure moment. And Channing, being the actor that he is, he stayed there, while the cameras weren't rolling for 90 minutes and built that thing and just cared so much about the experience. It was, I'm just so happy you brought that moment up, because it is such a lost little small detail that kind of tells the whole story of this man's heart, and also the character of Jeff. His desire was to try to be a father. He just kept screwing up the ways to do it. And I think with this second family, it was his chance to try to get it right.
The other scene that jumps out is a more physical, bigger scene, and again speaks to Channing's physical abilities from his action hero and dance days, and that's the streaking scene, which is hysterically funny, and he has to leap over things, jump out of the way, all the while keeping himself, under wraps. Tell me about that scene and how many times you did that to get that scene right.
So the scene where he's caught taking a sponge bath in the toy store bathroom was a real scene. I mean, that actually happened to Jeff, and I wrote it, and I imagined, once Peter Dinklage was on, I just, couldn't stop imagining it with the two of them. And I never talked to Channing about that scene. It was in the script. And the day came that we were going to shoot it. And I remember he said, how are we going to do this scene? And I was like, did you read the script? And he was like, yeah, but how are you going to shoot it? I was like, we're going to shoot what's in the script, And so Channing was like, and Channing, who is, look, one of the things I loved about Channing too is he made those Magic Mike movies, and they're autobiographical. And again, what a brave, creative force he is to take his own life and put it on display for everyone to see. So I knew he was brave enough to do that. And he said, okay, let's shoot it. And so we shot that scene. I had kept Peter and Channing apart the entire shooting of the movie. So they never met each other. Channing was always hiding in his hidey hole, watching Peter, on the monitors. So they never actually met. I made sure that they were always ships in the night. They could never interact with each other. And the first time they saw each other, I made sure that the camera was on Peter. So the moment of Peter seeing Channing for the first time, the full Monty Channing, was the first time Peter ever saw Channing. Peter's, I think it made an impression on Peter.
Fair to say, yes. I think you can make an impression on anyone. That's the first time meeting Channing Tatum.
Well, also, I had to make sure Peter consented to that. I was like, are you okay with this? And Peter, being just the champion that he is, was all in. So we had so much. It was really hard, but it was also inherently like what you see in the audience and the reaction you feel in a theater watching that scene is very similar to the reaction, that we felt watching the scene and making the scene. It's like we all had to try not to laugh and ruin the takes. But we shot it like 15 times. I really was interested in getting that the physicality right. And there's a moment when he kind of gets clotheslined by his jump rope clothesline, and we really worked, we really worked hard on that pratfall, making sure that was just right, that it didn't expose too much, and that it felt believable. And Channing just threw himself. I mean, he literally threw himself into every aspect of this movie. He was like such a dream to work with as a filmmaker. He was like the best ally you could have, because if I would ask him, like, I don't believe the fall when you slip, when you're covered in soap suds and you slip on the linoleum floor and hit the ground. Could you do that again? And he did it 15 times until we got exactly the right moment. And yeah, I'm forever indebted to him for that.
I think my favorite move is when he vaults over the wall,
Oh
and
my
just
goodness.
it's an incredible vault, and he makes it look easy, but I can only imagine how difficult it is to actually do that.
It was difficult to
Make it
climb
work.
up on a bike rack in a toy store, completely buck naked. And when I was shooting that scene, all I could think of was like Borat. All I could think of was like, here we are watching this classic moment. I've had that happen a few times making movies, like when I'm shooting something and I see something that I know that a lot of people are going to watch over and over again. And there's so many moments like that in movies. You brought up Risky Business. Of course, there's the classic scene with Tom Cruise, with George Thorogood's song. And, Channing wanted to do an homage to that in this movie. And, you just try to, I think the job of a filmmaker, my job is to try to put those images or moments or experiences up on the screen that can kind of become those iconic moments. So, the time is to tell, but time will tell whether or not that stands it. But certainly, it's I've never seen it before.
He does Tom Cruise one better since he goes, without any underwear at all. So, there's that.
Exactly.
I definitely want to mention Kirsten Dunst as well, because it's an equally great role for her, I think, and it's the kind of part that could sort of be the token girlfriend role, but I think she pushes it far beyond that, in your writing as well, of how you wrote her. And I wonder, in terms of how you cast these things, once you had Channing in mind, how do you then think about who's going to play opposite him? Do you sort of form an opinion early on, or do you bring in different people to test it opposite him once you know who you want that main part?
Well, first off, say that Lee is a real person. I spoke with her for the first time a couple of years into researching Jeff's story, and before I spoke with her, I kind of assumed that she was going to be hurt. I felt like the person I was going to talk to was going to feel bitter or betrayed or angry with Jeff, but the person that I met in the real Lee was this person that had so much warmth and so much strength and so much grace. And she looked back at her time with Jeff as just this jewel of her life. And she thought that Jeff was just this unicorn and she said he was the greatest adventure of my life. And so she wasn't a dummy. She was just a person with an open heart who fell in love. And you don't think when you fall in love with someone that they're an ex-con who's on the run, who's hiding out in a toy store, and she gave him the benefit of the doubt. But I think what I needed in that casting is to find someone who wasn't going to be gullible. I needed to find someone who wasn't going to be the victim. I needed to find someone who had that strength. And I had met Kirsten when I was casting another movie, and I really felt like her and I needed to work together. I mean, look, I grew up with watching Kirsten Dunst in everything she's ever been in, from Interview with the Vampire to Virgin Suicides to Spider-Man, to Melancholia. I think she's just one of the finest actors that we have. She feels like a living legend to me. And I could really only imagine her in the movie. Also, she's also a mom. And I think that I needed to cast someone who understood the kind of sacrifice and of what it meant to be a parent, to be able to play that role. And Kirsten, like her kids are like the number one thing in her life. My kids are the number one thing in my life. Channing's daughter is the number one thing in his life. And Jeff's kids were the number one thing in his life. And so I needed to find people that knew that this story was about how important it was to be a parent and how your children are more important than anything. And Kirsten understood that to her core. And then, I gave her the script. She said it made her feel warm. She felt like the world needed a movie like this. And she came on board, and she was, I cannot say enough good things about her. There was never a false moment. As I edited the movie, literally every take was honest, was complicated. She's such a good listener. She is just absolutely a machine. And what's so interesting about Kirsten, she's a child actor who's been doing this her whole life. She's also just salt of the earth. She's also just like a regular person who's been in front of the camera in the limelight her whole life. She's like a normal person. One of the great scenes in the movie, it actually got cut out of the movie, but one of the great performances was I had the real police that had interviewed the real Lee 20 years ago interview Kirsten. And I didn't have anything written for the scene. I just had them improvise. They said, "What do you want us to say?" I said, "Ask her exactly what you asked the real Lee." I was like, "I can't write the story. I can't write what you guys did. So just do it again." And they're like, "Okay." They assumed like Hollywood was coming to town, but they got into this thing with Kirsten, and at the end of it, they were blown away that she had transported them back to that moment. And they were like it was happening again. So I don't know. She has this quality that is it's profound. Her talent is profound.
I definitely wanted to ask about the Toys R Us store because that's equally a character in the movie. And I was talking earlier about 90s movies I loved. And one of my low-key favorite movies was Career Opportunities, where Frank Whaley is locked into Target after hours. It gave you this great, as a kid, you're like, oh my God, I'm in the Target after hours. This is great. And
Jeff Manchester loves that movie too, by the way.
Excellent. But creating that space and letting people live out that fantasy, I thought was really fun. And Toys R Us obviously isn't as much of a brand anymore. Tell me about recreating that store and the importance of that location to you and getting that right.
This has always been a Christmas movie to me. Christmas movies are about nostalgia. Christmas movies in general are about a return home. And one of the things to create this nostalgia or this return home was to create this Toys R Us, because Toys R Us, went out of business in, 2018, I believe. So there was no more, I mean, there's still Toys R Us there and like Macy's and stuff, but these standalone big box Toys R Us, when we shot the movie last year, there were no more around. There was actually 3 existing shells of Toys R Us because most of them had been turned into like Spirit Halloween stores. But we found one in North Carolina. Actually, the real one where Jeff stayed has become a church, like a mega church. So we couldn't shoot in there. But the band leader from that church was the band leader of our band. But anyway, so we had to find this big box Toys R Us. It still had the facade, like the ghostly images of where the lights had been taken off. We went inside one day, and it was just 45,000 square foot empty cavernous space. Every tile had been taken up from the floor. There was thousands of light bulbs, of which like maybe 50 were left. So it was in an immense job to bring this thing back to life. We had to put every tile on the floor. We had to put all the lights back. We had, people had stripped all the copper wire from the store. So we had to restore the electrical system. We had to, my production designer, Imbal Weinberg, this is the 4th film I've made with her. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. 4th film I've made with her. And she knows whenever we make things together, we're always talking about creating environments for actors. We want to create real worlds for them. And to me, this idea of making this toy store was like creating a fish tank. And we had to create the whole thing. It wasn't, and we didn't really have the budget to do it. But it was such a crucial element to this film because I wanted to be able to unleash Channing and have Kirsten and Peter actually be in a toy store. And I do it for the actors, really. I do it so that they can have the choice. And there was a moment when Imbal was like taking truckloads and truckloads of period toys that we had gotten from eBay and from collectors, and she would be filling it up on the shelves, and it was not making a dent. You don't realize how big and how many toys are in a toy store. And I wanted to make sure that the toys were, 3 toys deep, and that there was toys in all the boxes, and that they were, we had to get the Tickle Me Elmos, and it was just an immense undertaking. It was like pulling the steamship over the mountain in Fitzcarraldo. It was like it was an impossible impossible task, but we got it. And then what ends up happening from that is you get these magic moments. We talked about the risky business scene. So I had the real Jeff Manchester. I had talked to him a couple weeks ago, and he's in a maximum security prison, so he hasn't been able to see the movie yet because they won't allow it. They won't allow him to see it, but he's seen clips of it on the news, and he saw the movie poster on the news, and he called me and he said, "Hey, Derek, I got a question." He was like, "I saw this image of Channing in like a set of Heelys, and he's got like his underwear, and he's got like a pool floaty around his waist and a teddy bear on his neck and sunglasses." He was like, "Where'd you guys get that idea?" And I said, "Well, Jeff, we built a Toys R Us, and I was setting up a shot, and Channing wheels around the corner, and he looked like that." And he said, "Hey, I think we should do a risky business homage." And so I turned the camera and shot him. And Jeff said, "I'm really happy to hear that." He's like, thing that most people don't know is that if you live in a toy store for 6 months, it has a way to connect you to your inner child. And I'm just so happy that Channing got a chance to connect with his. So it's a lot of work, but then you get these things that come out of that. And I could never expect that to happen unless I create the situation for those actors.
Well, last question. You mentioned earlier at the top how you felt like you wanted to move away from the films you were making earlier, and Roofman represents this kind of transition film for you. How does it point to where you hope to go next? How is this sort of your and you entering into your next era, for lack of a better word?
Well, as I said, I've been raising my boys for a couple decades now, and they're of age, and I honestly spent so many years trying to not make movies because I just wanted to be present as a father. And so this movie represents to me a moment of renaissance, I hope, for me, where I can, start becoming more prolific and make more things. I had such a joy. This movie was very hard to make, but it was just a joy, and I feel so blessed to make it. So, I'm working. I have my next things going, but with this movie, I was always thinking because my wife, she's a comedian, and I'm always been more into tragedy, and I was thinking that they're very close. Like my wife, she's more serious at home, and I'm more fun loving at home, and so she might disagree with that, but I was thinking comedy and tragedy are flip sides of the same coin. And I was thinking that with this movie, maybe what we could do is flip the coin in the air. And as it spins, you could see both sides. And because comedy and tragedy are like that, if you slip on a banana peel, it hurts, but you laugh at it. And so it's that humor in pain. And it was a real joy and a challenge to find where that tone could shift and where we could kind of swing back and forth between those two sides of and so I don't know. I feel like making this movie, I've climbed Mount Everest a couple of times, and I'm psyched to find the next mountain.
Thanks for listening to Awards Magnet, Gold Derby podcast. Like what you heard? Leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Awards Magnet is produced by Andrew Merrill. Our logo is designed by Chelsea Sakura. Please like and subscribe to stay on top of all the awards news, and email us at awardsmagnet@goldderby.com.